Well, 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 look what the cat dragged in. You found me. Yes, here I am, still in the goddamn department. I am still residing in the dusty and musty tortured poets department. And you know what? This is where I like to be. This is where I'd like to live. It's a place that many people moved on from too quickly. And so I think that we need to have another conversation about this incredible record because people just aren't getting it. People just aren't getting it and they're stupid. I love to know that something is excellent that other people don't understand. I love that. That's a feeling that I cherish and relish. So if the haters and losers aren't getting Tortured Poets Department, I say with pleasure, with ease, with relish, with grace, your mom's a hoe. But today I want to zoom in on a specific professor at the department, an adjunct. She only shows up when it's a gray, dark, rainy day outside and she's ready to fail some students. Yes, that's right. It's LOML. And I have been dying to have this conversation with you about why it's the greatest song ever made and the greatest song in the Tortured Poets Department. I've been looking for the right time, but I've been whacked by errors to our content over the last year. And finally, today I've been able to collect my scruples and give a dissertation to you, a PhD defense, if you will. And what I'm defending to you today is, in fact, that LOML is the best song on Tortured Poets and potentially one of the greatest songs that Taylor Swift has ever written because it is shocking, it is disturbing, it is upsetting, it is traumatizing, it's emotional exhibitionism of the highest order. It's like the very apex of the entire Taylor Swift project. And because people are too stupid to listen to an album that has an intro that is longer than 4 seconds, they've missed it and they don't get it. But luckily, I get it and you get it. And we're here in the department to talk about it. Now, I've said that this is the apex of the Taylor Swift project, so I guess I should define what that project is, right? We'll get into it. We'll get into it. But first, please be seated because you're about to get schooled. If you are watching this before the Grammys, then it's your lucky day because I'm letting you know that I will be streaming the Grammys live on Twitch. I can't do it on YouTube because they keep whacking me for copyright. So I won't even really be able to post anything on YouTube about it. I can maybe do some TikToks. But if you want to see a replay of that, you can go to my Patreon, patreon.com/Swiftologist. I will make it available for sale for like $5 if you don't want to subscribe to the Patreon, which you should, because if you're watching this video, I know you're going to like what we have on the Patreon. And Evolution of a Snake, the Taylor Swift podcast that I co-host, is going on tour, and LA is sold out. Yay. DC is very nearly sold out. Boston and New York City have low ticket warnings. So go to evolutionofasnake.com to get your tickets. Are you guys living for my rudimentary PowerPoint presentation skills? I haven't had to make a PowerPoint since I worked a corporate job. And let me tell you, when I worked a corporate job, people were not asking me to make PowerPoints because this is what I would come up with. Some of you may be wondering, why are you making this video? Well, you know what? I'm sick and tired of seeing Tortured Poets slander every single day of my life. I can't make a single comment about any other artist without someone being like, oh, the Tortured PTSD department was your worst album of last year. So what about that? I don't give If you're using the words table stiff, you are simply too low of an IQ to understand what takes place on the Tortured Poets Department. Many of these people calling Tortured Poets the worst album ever made, specifically saying that her writing is bad, have clearly never heard this song. They've clearly never had their heart broken because nobody wants to date them. They've never been duped by a romantic conquest. And if you have ever felt like another person has reached down your throat emotionally, rearranged your insides, and then slashed your stomach open and left you to bleed out on the street, you would get it. But these people have not had real life experiences, so they don't know. This song requires an emotional intelligence that many aren't privy to, but luckily Taylor Swift is, and thank God for that. The greatest song on the greatest album ever made, it's more likely than you think. So the best song on a Taylor Swift record is generally subjective, but in my opinion, it's actually objective. It is the centerpiece of the record, the emotional heartbeat of it, and the best song will often conflict with your personal favorite song on the record. For example, the best song on Red is, as we all know, and don't argue with me all too well, Holy Ground is my supermodel, my diva, my karma, my breeze in the hair on the weekend. But I can see greatness when greatness is in front of me, and I know that All Too Well is the better song. There are a few albums to make, I think, for other albums. Like, for example, is Speak Now's best song Dear John or Enchanted? It really depends on which way you're looking at that record. I mean, just ask yourself, is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? But generally, it's pretty easy to tell what the standout tracks are. For example, Debut. We're thinking of the songs that, surmise the entire mission of the project, right? Teardrops on My Guitar, Fearless, Love Story. Speak Now, I'm gonna go with Dear John, Red, All Too Well, 1989, It's Blank Space, Reputation, Look What You Made Me Do, and Stay Mad About It, Lovers, Cruel Summer, Folklore is Mirror Ball, and Evermore, this might be a hot take, is Right Where You Left Me. Midnights is You're On Your Own, Kid. I mean, I could sit here and explain to you why each and every one of those is the best song on the record, but I shan't, because today I'm going to be giving you an entire defense of why LOML is in fact the best song on the Tortured Poets Department. And note that it conflicts with my favorite song yet again. My favorite song on the Tortured Poets Department is But Daddy, I Love Him. But it's not the best song on the record. This is. In general, Tortured Poets is actually kind of a tricky record to pick a best song for. Maybe if you don't know what you're looking for, that is. But I'll humor everyone for this moment. Tortured Poets is a colossal record. There are so many ideas that are being explored on this album, so many roads less traveled that have suddenly been traversed, that it can be kind of like jarring and overwhelming to try and find one specific moment that gags, shocks, reveals more than any other. But I think that the hallmark of each of the best songs that I just mentioned is that they reveal something that we didn't know about Taylor Swift, the songwriter, the artist, before the record existed. And I don't mean like a piece of drama or some tea. I mean like an emotional truth, a resonance in her verse that kicked her project into a new dimension or showed her in a different light as an artist. I want to revisit my favorite review of the Tortured Poets Department and Powers from NPR, who decided to review the article without discussing, an existential question of who Taylor Swift is, to highlight why exactly LOML is that best song and the bleeding heart of Tortured Poets. Tortured Poets is the culmination of a catalog full of songs in which Swift has taken us into the bedrooms where men pleasured or misled her, the bars where they charmed her, the empty playgrounds where they sat on swings with her and promised something they couldn't give. When she sings repeatedly that one of the most suspect characters on the album told her he was the love of her life, she's sharing something nobody else heard. That's the point. She's testifying under her own oath. Tortured Poets and Red are sisters. Yes, the hell they are. We know that Taylor's mission as an artist is to remember. That's exactly what Red is and what Tortured Poets is, specifically to catalog the things that slip away from us with time, because memory tends to warp things. The more you move on, the further away a past feeling will become. Like a bruise that fades over time, your heartbreaks will change shape and color. But the point of writing it down is to crystallize a feeling at that specific moment before it can fade away. Feelings are by nature temporal. If Taylor had sat down to write LOML on any other day, perhaps she wouldn't have included as many confessions on it, or perhaps it wouldn't have even made it onto this record. The point is that every song she creates needed to be let out of her psyche at that specific moment. The emotional truth of it all would become diluted. We see the impulse to write it down quickly and immediately in her best work. The more cynical she approaches something, the more distance she takes away from a piece of writing. I'm going to make a hit, for example, when going in to make me, the worse the material becomes. Fortunately and unfortunately, the very best Taylor Swift lyrics come from the most intense, all-consuming, and honest emotional experiences. So in that sense, to hide her real emotions from her audience is to hide her emotions from her own self. There's a version of Tortured Poets Department that completely paints Maddie Healy as the con man who sold a fool a get-love-quick scheme that focuses entirely on the smallest man who ever lived and leaves the fool who brought the counterfeit product out of the frame entirely. She could have, as she has done in the past, painted the story in a way that made her look like a victim or a hero. But our narrator does not come away from the Tortured Poets Department unscathed. The fool is ridiculed. She is put on a pedestal and laughed at by her master, the omniscient writerly hand of Taylor Swift, her higher consciousness that only intervenes in her life with song. She may have gotten the last word in this Maddie Healy debacle, but in the process of getting it all out, Taylor Swift has had to admit some humiliating truths about herself to the world, which is what makes this work so honest and amazing. You all knew this would end. Everyone in my life knew that the situation would go up in flames. The only person that should have known that this would gut me to my very core, but somehow didn't, is me, the foolish one, who jumps in with 2 feet and makes the same mistake over and over again, because although her heart is torn and scarred over, it still beats for love. And LOML is the perfect example of this. Let's return to the question I posed at the top of this video. What is the Taylor Swift project? So every pop star who is also a songwriter, I would say, has both a mission and a purpose. And these are fundamentally different things. A mission is the specific actionable objective that you're seeking to achieve. It's the what and the how you go about getting something or accomplishing something. Taylor's mission here is to externalize her inner life through song. She mediates her emotions through the medium of songwriting to, first of all, make sense of it for herself, but second of all, help you, the listener, make sense of your emotional life too. There is a huge element of catharsis in both the production and the consumption of her work. Taylor Swift's purpose, however, is something that is more about the why than it is about the what and the how. Why is Taylor's mission to externalize her inner life through song? Well, I would argue that she was placed on this earth, put here in the position that she is in, to act as the ambassador of heartbreak. If all of our most fundamentally human experiences and emotions had representatives, heartbreak would take its form in Taylor Swift. Not only does she chronicle her experience as the heartbroken person, and also the person doing the heartbreak herself, she also takes down the myriad ways in which being heartbroken can manifest itself in a human life. Heartbreak is devastating. It floors you, it leaves you reeling, it disturbs your sense of self, it disrupts your perception of time, it fundamentally rattles your understanding of your own reality. But also, it is a process. There is a way to have a broken heart. There are things you can do to speed up or slow down its recovery. There are emotions to go through, sitting on the floor wearing his old clothes, swallowing your pride, saying, I'm sorry for that night, getting smarter and getting harder in the nick of time. For example, it's not all bad. From heartbreak comes rebirth. Your heart is regenerative. That's a lesson that everybody needs to learn through heartbreak. It heals itself each and every time, even when the pain feels like it will be forevermore. Taylor shows us this lesson over and over again. She kind of lives in a sort of emotional Groundhog Day. We see this so clearly in The Prophecy, which is, to me, the highest level of Taylor Swift. This is her subconscious self, that omniscient writer that knows the story before it unfolds somehow. And in this song, her mortal self, the one who is in the throes of a strange and unfamiliar heartbreak, throws herself at the mercy of her all-knowing shadow twin. She's lamenting her destiny, as so many damned people often do. Please, I've been on my knees, she begs, change the prophecy. I don't want money. I just want someone who wants my company. Let it once be me. Who do I have to speak to about if they can redo the prophecy? The irony of it all is that she's speaking to herself. She's saying, okay, you made this choice to commodify your pain. Now, can you please undo it? Because I just can't feel like this anymore. I can't go through this again. But the higher self shakes her head and dismisses this request. The prophecy is set in stone. A greater woman wouldn't beg, but I looked to the sky and said, please. You see, that girl on her knees who is looking to the sky and begging, the bargaining with the prophecy, means that our heartbreak ambassador is doing the right thing. She will never be able to continue doing her work of being the heartbreak ambassador if she fully understands that this prophecy is her purpose and that the mission might change, but her purpose is inevitable. So on the one hand, our narrator must live her life blissfully unaware that this cycle will keep repeating itself. The work she's doing as the heartbreak reporter is bigger and more important than any kind of earthly happiness she can attain. That is the ultimate reward in and of itself, and it's ultimately what she wants, because otherwise she wouldn't still be doing this. Hello, she wouldn't be opening herself up like this in public. But she can't fully be cognizant of it, or else that kind of gives the game away. She has to fully believe that she has the ability to change the prophecy in order to fulfill its purpose. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Is any of this making any sense? I feel like I'm getting very esoteric. And also, just to reinforce, I'm talking about like Taylor Swift, the character on the page. I'm not talking about her destiny in her real life or what her circumstances will turn out to be. So much of Tortured Poets is Taylor rattling the bars of her enclosure. She's fighting with her higher self. She's pushing back against her destiny. She's literally trying to interfere with her own fate, but it's futile because it's all set in stone. There is a natural order to her work that must be followed, and LOML is a really good example of her reckoning with the fact that she has little to no control over her future, and the fact that it's Maddie Healy who prompts this realization actually ends up being, as it always is with Taylor's work, besides the point, because again, all of this work that's created about him says much more interesting stuff about her than it does about him. The chaotic, manipulative narcissist with substance abuse issues tells lies and cons girls. Well, we knew that. We knew that. We just didn't know that Taylor Swift was susceptible to falling for it. And to expand on what we didn't know was how little Taylor Swift has fundamentally changed as a romantic from the very first time she felt that teardrop on her guitar. She had convinced herself and her audience for some time, those of us who bear witness to the mission and the purpose playing out in real time, that she had solved this riddle for herself. She had conquered the prophecy. I don't have to be the heartbreak reporter anymore with Joe Alwyn. I can explore the boundaries of that role and veer off into different directions as I have found the one I will love forever and ever. It's true that when Taylor does go off course from her specific, frame of reference, her subject of reportage, when she tackles things that are not directly related to her purpose, it can have surprisingly lucid results. I'm thinking Clara Bow, Folklore, some of the other Folkmore songs, Nothing New. But when you really probe the best examples of her not about love songs, they are still about a heartbreak of some description. Clara Bow and Nothing New are about the heartbreak of being forgotten and passed over. Marjorie is the heartbreak of losing a loved one. It's rare that when Taylor goes off course, she completely veers away from this subject of heartbreak. And when she loses touch with her subject completely, that is when the plot unravels. Lover is the best example of this. Me, You Need to Calm Down, Only the Young. These are some of the worst songs of her career. The Ambassador strayed too far from the embassy. Come back, Queen. You have a job to do. And Tortured Poets is such a return to form because it's a full-throated reunion with her purpose. She surrenders herself to the prophecy and is not trying to keep it at bay anymore. That self-consciousness that really permeates Midnights and Lover and even moments of Folklore and Evermore, by the sheer sheer fact of the obfuscation that went on there, they are still emotional records, but they feel cool, distant, and removed. That distance is completely destroyed by the tsunami of feeling on Tortured Poets. There will be no more holding back. The dam has burst, it has held too much for too long, and now it must flow freely. And that's why the scope of feeling on Tortured Poets is difficult for people to understand on a cursory listen. She has a lot of ground to cover. She's been keeping quiet for too long. On Tortured Poets, we are listening to the scribblings of someone who has been crossing out her work and hiding the best of it in drawers, attempting to beat herself at her own game. But you cannot fight your destiny. It's from this searching and desperate place that we hear her almost whisper and then howl, LOML. If Down Bad describes the jarring and abrupt nature of being ejected from your fantasy land, LOML is the sound that you make when you're curled up on the floor long after you've waved the ship with your entire future and all your hopes and dreams on it off into a dark night. Let's get into the meat of the song, shall we? Going down streaks. We are starting out strong and in pain. Who's going to stop us from waltzing back into rekindled flames if we know the steps anyway? We embroidered the memories of the time I was away, stitching "We Were Just Kids, Babe." I said, I don't mind, it takes time. I thought I was better safe than starry-eyed. I felt a glow like this never before and never since. There is a whole universe in this opening stanza alone. Mama, do we have some explaining to do? Who's going to stop us from waltzing back into rekindled flames? Unfortunately, absolutely no one at all. A defining feature of the romance that animates Tortured Poets is just how insular their love was. It was two delusional people telling each other, no, queen, exactly, to the befuddlement and confusion of literally everyone around them. Taylor had at this point been plotting her reunion with this old flame and her escape from her current circumstances for years. If we're going all the way back to The One and Cardigan and Ivy, that's like at least 3 years of plotting or seriously considering this. It's serious enough if you're putting it down in song, and according to her, she had been missing him forever. Nothing had been the same ever since that meteor strike. Plus, it was a familiar shoe that she was stepping back into this time. She had walked this path before, and she knew the edges of the street. But you see, the difference is you cannot just pick back up where you left off in literally any situation in life. Both Taylor and her muse here have abstracted their meanings to each other to an inhuman place. You turned me into an idea of sorts. It's true of both of them. Each of them projects what they want to see onto the other person who actually exists. And guess what? The person that you make up in your head, which is a combination of the past and what you hope for in the future, is very different to the person who is standing there in front of you who has the capacity to change their mind. And that's what gagged Taylor so bad about this. She had spent years of labor, locks and ceilings planning this homecoming, for all of it to be completely squandered after she had burned her own life down to facilitate it. No one can stop you from rekindling the flame, but can't you also see that that specific flame could never be replicated entirely? When she talks about embroidering the memory of the time that they were away, she's letting bygones be bygones. She's forgetting and ignoring all the reasons why this didn't work out in the first place, politics and gender roles and you're not sure and I don't know, etc. And what she's doing here is something that is a very relatable human experience when you're getting back together with someone you shouldn't be specifically. We choose to turn a blind eye to the ways in which we fell apart the first time in the hope we won't fall apart that same way again. Well, what you learn in that process is that there's more than one way to fall apart, Miss Diva. She says, I don't mind. It takes time. She had reconciled to herself that she had been waiting forever and she would continue to wait until the moment was right. She did the right thing. She saw out her relationship with Joe to its logical end, even though she felt like she was dying inside every day. You say I abandoned the ship, as she says in So Long London, but I was going down with it. My white knuckle dying grip. Then all of a sudden, she's fresh out the slammer. She's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. She's ready to come home to her real love. When she met Joe, she thought that picking the safe bet, the stiff upper lip, boring Englishman would be better for her than getting into a relationship with a narcissistic drug addict. And well, she was sort of right about that. But what we can surmise from what she's written about Joe is that he did not excite her and animate her in the ways that more dynamic exes of hers have done in the past. She was bored. Years of labor, locks, and ceilings, may I repeat. I thought I was better safe than starry-eyed. And isn't being starry-eyed kind of what being alive is all about? Those moments where you can literally feel your own blood coursing through your veins, where you can hear your heart beating in your chest. A certain kind of love is an adrenaline rush. And as a writer, this is the instinct that Taylor is always barreling towards, whether or not it's actually good for her, because it's material. Again, we have the prophecy. She can only fight against her instinct to collide with another true romantic for so long. After all, she felt aglow with Maddie Healy, as she describes, and she had never felt that way with any of her many chronicled heartbreaks. And the disconnect was so severe that she's afraid she'll never be able to feel that way again. We knew that this isn't true, but as the heartbreak reporter in this moment moment that she's singing LOML from, she has to essentially revert to this very, very low feeling every single time something ends in order to light the spark that's required to write a song like LOML. Are you following me here? Then we get into that first chorus. If you know it in one glimpse, it's legendary. You and I go from one kiss to getting married, still alive, killing time at the cemetery, never quite buried. Love at first sight. Oh, that is a powerful thing for a hopeless romantic. It leads many a dutiful daughter with all her plans laid towards a significant life derailment. The allure and the power of chemistry, that one kiss that tells you something more than anything words can say. I think here we can see that because she's built this up in her head for so long, she's ready to reap the reward that she searched for in her prior relationship. Okay, since I've wanted this for so long and we've been blabbing to anyone who'll listen about how this is meant to be, it is well and truly acceptable for us to get married now. It's that serious to her. Then she describes it as never quite buried. I love the image of her and Matty Healy in his Jehovah's Witness suit, just kind of kicking rocks around this desolate gray cemetery, not making eye contact, knowing that they can't ever really be rid of each other forever. They've already been here, you see. The first time that it fell apart, it was never quite buried. She doesn't know it yet in the instance that this song is written in, but it will in fact eventually be put to rest, and the act of writing this song helps that to be the case. This is why I love the meta-narrative of tortured poets. It's very interesting. And she continues on in the rest of the chorus. In your suit and tie, in the nick of time, you low down boy, you stand up guy. This is one of my favorite lyrics on the record. You holy ghost, you told me I'm the love of your life. Like a million times. Again, there he is, always at the exact right time. He catches her at the moments where she is most susceptible to his beguiling gaze. It's like he has a sixth sense to know when she needs an interruption, when his presence can make maximum impact. Bejeweled, for example, they asked, do you have a man? I can still say I don't remember when I meet the band. She has now, at this point, seen another side to him that she did not know was there before. You low down boy, you child, with your false promises and your zero follow through, but also you stand-up guy. You were there for me when I needed to be broken out of jail. You got me through that painful and protracted dissolution of my last relationship. It was your face that I dreamt of that gave me the courage and the wherewithal to finally leave. And now, here you are, or rather, here you aren't. You Holy Ghost. You've disappeared again. You saved me. You rescued my heart. And now you've dropped it on the floor and ran away. You said, I'm the love of your life about 1,000,000 times. The way she says this and delivers this, you can hear her reeling. She can't believe that he said something so serious to her, so unbelievably promising. He let it roll off his tongue like it was true and like it was nothing. And he wasn't even brave enough to take it back. He just left. In the second verse, she's really starting to clock his tea and clock his lies, and the gravity of the situation, the impact that it's going to have on her life going forward is finally felt. Who's going to tell me the truth when you blew in with the winds of fate and told me I reformed you? When your impressionist paintings of heaven turned out to be fakes? Well, you took me to hell too. And all at once, the ink bleeds. A con man sells a fool a get love quick scheme. But I felt a hole like this never before and ever since. Again, this relationship was very insular, but it was also, sadly to say, a predictable outcome. People did tell her this. The whole world, in fact, was telling her, this is not going to work. You're going to end up unhappy for one reason or another. But you know, when you're in love, you go blind and you go deaf. She's so flabbergasted by the duality of his strident commitment to loving her versus how easy it was for him to stop and to just leave, that she's retroactively being like, why didn't anyone stop me from allowing this to happen? Why didn't anyone tell me? We have the winds of fate here. You see, she knows the prophecy. She is aware that she can't fight her destiny. He blew in like the winds of fate. We can see the higher self, the writerly observer self saying here, you knew this would come, but you had no idea how it would end. It's like a self-betrayal almost, like she's failed on an instinctual marking she was supposed to have. She's chastising herself for not predicting the outcome as she often tries to do. Taylor is always trying to get a sense of control over the things that are uncontrollable in her music. She loves love because she is, again, a control freak, and love is the one fickle, unpredictable thing that she cannot micromanage. And though she tries like hell, it is unconquerable to her. That's what makes it the most stimulating, but also the most frustrating experience in her life and in her role as the heartbreak reporter. When your impressionist paintings of heaven turned out to be fakes, this is an interesting line here. Impressionist art is generally more concerned with grandiosity and feeling, emotion, rather than accuracy. So it's not trying to be a photorealistic depiction of something. Maddie spun a very pretty yarn for her, as we'll discover later on in the bridge of this song. But what's important to note here is that Taylor knew, even when he was doing these paintings, that he was painting heaven, which, you know, may or may not be real, and that it was really just a nice idea. The shock here is that even his fictional and hopeful dream painting wasn't real. The shock here is that even his fictional, hopeful daydream was fake. He didn't actually dream it. He didn't actually believe it. It's not like their love fell apart naturally or that they had some big fight or that something went wrong. He just decided one day that it wasn't that serious. He just changed his mind. And how does that make you feel? It makes you feel conned. And feeling conned or feeling duped at the end of a love affair is one of the most painful and confrontational feelings because the onus is also on you. Shame on me. You cannot just shove off responsibility onto the con artist. You have to admit yourself that there's some part of you that let yourself be conned. And then they start to unravel too. All at once, the ink bleeds. The con man sells a fool, a get love quick scheme. I can see a few meanings here behind the ink bleeds, but the first that really jumps out at me is that their love story was fated. It was written. And Taylor was merely in her mind, just following that divine order of things. She was going along with the prophecy. Everyone here understands that we're meant to be, as she says on the title track. All of a sudden, when he changes his mind and the trick starts to become clear to her, she's looking at that story again, and the ink is bleeding out of the spaces where it was supposed to be. The story is derailing. It's degrading over time. It's literally dissolving in front of her. I can also see this as maybe being a reference to her writing. Torture Poets, the title track, is to me an anxious song. It sounds like it was written before they broke up, but there is kind of a pathetic desperation in it. Who's going to know you like me? No one. So don't you dare even try and leave me. Everyone understands why this is meant to be. She's trying in that moment to write her way out of what's coming next, which is the demise of their love, him just leaving. But she knows that she can't. And just as soon as she writes it down, as soon as she writes their love story down perfectly in her notebook, the ink bleeds, the story fades. She has no control over it anymore. Also very important to note here, a con man sells a fool a get love quick scheme. This is why this song and this album are such a revelation to Taylor Swift. The last true breakup album that we had before Tortured Poets was Red. That was more than 10 years ago. And that album was, in general, very much focused on an I was wronged perspective. She definitely explored more of that gray area that we live in with others, but ultimately, she was mostly learning lessons that still had a victim or a villain. She had not yet contended with a con man and a fool. The victim does nothing to cause whatever tragedy has befallen them. Whatever wrong has been done to them is a moral wrong in the wider universe. They are justified in feeling wrong. The fool is a completely different archetype than the victim. The fool is someone who should have known better, who had the capacity to choose differently, maybe, or who just wasn't smart enough to see the con man coming. There is an admission of guilt, of emotional carelessness, of losing your reason here. Taylor's literally saying, yeah, I was sold a lie. And I bought it. I fell for it hook, line, and sinker to my own detriment. And here I am in front of the goddamn world saying that I had no idea this was going to destroy me like this. And now in front of all of you with my emotional exhibitionism that I am duty bound to perform for you, I am literally unable to get up and keep going like nothing happened. I felt a hole like this never before and never since. And now up next, this is when the chorus lyric starts to change, and you should always steel yourself for when she starts to change up the lyrics in the chorus in a song. She's cooking in different areas. If you know it in one glimpse, it's legendary. What we thought was for all time was momentary. Still alive, killing time at the cemetery, never quite buried. You cinephile in black and white, all those plot twists and dynamite. Mr. Steal your girl, then make her cry. Maddie Healy, when I catch you, it's over. You said, I'm the love of your life. I love the introduction of legendary and momentary here because both of these words circle back to us at a very pivotal moment later on in this song. But I mean, just take a moment to consider that. It was legendary and it was momentary. You expect something legendary to last a lifetime. You expect a great love to conquer all, but no. That's not what happened. There is some gorgeous imagery here on the back half too. You cinephile in black and white, all those plot twists and dynamite. Again, Taylor was sold a story. She was made false promises, but she also dreamed up a different version of reality that was detached from what was going on in front of her in a very delusional way. Remember, it was the con man who sold the fool a get love quick scheme, but the fool opened her wallet and paid the price, didn't she? It was literally a movie, a story too good to be true, something two-dimensional, something that could only exist in black and white or on television, that couldn't survive the contours and the color of the real world. All those plot twists and that dynamite, Mr. Steal your girl and make her cry. Okay, pause. Hold up. The plot twists and the dynamite were all the times that these two were subliminally reaching out to each other over the years. Maddie started doing this long before Taylor did, actually. Watch my timeline video to understand that. But what you need to know is that he literally duped her into thinking that he was ruminating on this forever entanglement much more seriously than he actually was. And meanwhile, all he ever did was turn her into an idea of sorts. I think he thought it would be fun and interesting and a lark to date the most famous pop princess in the world. And she was saying, I want want to get married. Do you see the disconnect here? Do you see how they're both delusional, but in different ways? And as we always know, the question is much more interesting than the answer. What's interesting is when you go back through the discography, there are various points where Taylor has written that Maddie begrudged other men who dated her in question. For example, she was on your mind with some dickhead guy that you saw that night, but you were on something. Meaning, you saw me just in a brand new relationship with some meathead that I wasn't quite committed to, and I was still kind of in love with you, but you were kind of messed up, so you couldn't get it together to pull me away, and so I escaped. Then she's out living her life, she's meeting the band, and he asks, do you have a man? And because she's been asked, Taylor can turn around and say, you know what, in this moment, I don't remember. He was literally goading her away from whatever situations she was in before she returned back to him. And then he made her cry. Jail. The repetition of, you said I'm the love of your life, she is just astounded on this song. Why the would you say that to me? Who forced you to do all of this? Was it a long con? Did you always plan on abandoning me like this? How is it possible for you to morph into a different person in front of my very eyes without me even noticing it? I didn't even notice it was falling apart until you were gone. The con man, the fool, a get love quick scheme. And here's where we get into the greatest song ever made territory. You talked me under the table, talking rings and talking cradles. I wish I could unrecall how we almost had it all. Dancing phantoms on the terrace. Are they secondhand embarrassed that I can't get out of bed because something counterfeit's dead? It was legendary. Please get up, Taylor Swift. Get up on your good foot. It was momentary. It was unnecessary. And this is the gag. Should have let it stay buried. You talk to me under the table is actually a very important line. This is an underrated kind of glimpse into Taylor's perception of herself here. We know, and Taylor knows, that she is a master manipulator. She has the gift of the gab. She is an extraordinarily charming person. Watch videos of her wriggling out of questions that she doesn't want to answer, or watch videos of her in awkward situations like meeting fans or someone being really starstruck to see her. She always knows the right move to make, the right thing to say, to finagle any social situation in her favor. People who meet her once are often so struck by how thoughtful she is, how kind she is, how she bakes people cookies to leave a good impression on them, how she has a closet at home full of gifts to just give people whenever a thoughtful gift is required. And yet, the con man beat the master at her own game. He rendered her the fool. You actually big upped this entire situation in a way that I never could. And I thought we were matching each other's freaks, she's saying. I thought we were saying, who else decodes you like me? I thought you also agreed that there was no one else who understood you the way that I do. But it turns out that you just wanted me to decode you. You weren't interested in decoding me. You were happy for me to try and learn you, to bend myself into whatever shape you might like. But once I started being a three-dimensional person that needed stability and commitment and a promise from you, but I didn't get from my last relationship that you told me you would provide, well, all of a sudden I was just an idea of sorts. It was easy to discard me. And what was he talking about? Not the weather, not anything that could warrant these lies, rings and cradles. Now that is just an evil thing to do to someone. Taylor clearly had not been love bombed by a manipulative narcissist before, and now she's had that experience in spades. The topic of marriage and children for Taylor and Joe was so tentative and very carefully discussed. She was kind of subliminal about how much she wanted it at times, specifically marriage. It's referenced quite a lot, but she's the most forthright about whatever that meant to her when she's discussing the breakdown of her relationship with Joe. I wouldn't marry me either. You swore that you loved me, but where were the clues? I died on the altar waiting for the proof. For Maddie to just right out the gate be like, I want all of you forever. I will make that promise to you in this moment now. That means something to a girly who has been passed over for years and years in the relationship that she thought was going to be the solution to her prophecy. And she believed it. She believed it when it came from him. She could not detect the obvious stench of bullshit because he sold it so well to her. I wish I could unrecall how we almost had it all. And here's where we get to the, oh my God, if I'm going to have to live without you, I've got to figure out a way to destroy the memories of you in my brain because I cannot compute having to live each and every day with this feeling of being betrayed by you, by myself, and by my own destiny. Dancing phantoms on the terrace. Are they secondhand embarrassed that I can't get out of bed because something counterfeit's dead? This lyric took me a while to parse, and I have a few interpretations of it, but I want to share just one with you today for the purpose of why LOML is the greatest song ever made. There's a lot of esoteric language on Tortured Poets Department, cosmic love, prophecies, albatrosses. We hear phantoms again in Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus. Can we watch our phantoms like watching wild horses? Cooler in theory, but not if you force it to be. And I think here these are the same dancing phantoms. They are the spiritual manifestations of these two people and their love. In some alternate universe, this story ends differently. Their fate is ever so slightly different, and Taylor can sense this presence of an alternate ending. It's what compelled her to pursue this train wreck in the first place. And now the specter of what she could have had is mocking her. It's almost like the perfect entity of their union that still exists out there somewhere in the world is humiliated and embarrassed by the failure of their earthly counterparts. Damn, you really messed this up. You fumbled this bag. All of this connection, this glory, they keep dancing, but Taylor cannot get out of bed because she was sold a lie, and that lie is gone. You see, it's not just that this love died. It's not just that it didn't work out or that the stars didn't align. It's that perhaps this was never even real to begin with. Perhaps there was never even something real there to hold on to. She's realizing I was in love with someone who didn't exist, and he loved a version of me that didn't exist, and we were both just pretending for a period of time that we understood each other and that we existed on the same plane. But really, he did her a kindness by cutting her off because, as we can see, she was down bad. I don't know how she would have responded if it went on any longer than 3 months. This really is the pinnacle of the song for me, and she brings back that couplet from earlier. It was legendary, it was momentary, but there's an addition here. It was unnecessary. Should have let it stay buried. This grand plan that I unraveled, this future that I had dreamed of and cooked up and finally got to actualize in my life, was a scam. I wrecked my life in service of something that added absolutely nothing to me. What did I learn from this? Nothing. Typically, Taylor's metabolizing of a heartbreak through song leads to a lesson, or at least a scolding for the person who wronged her. She can't figure out what she's learned from this or who she is after it. Heartbreak for Taylor Swift is material. It is always useful. But when she's in the thick of it, the higher self can't see that. It checks out. And her heart aches and the ink bleeds. It was unnecessary. I shouldn't have done this. I learned nothing. I am empty again. Thought I caught lightning in a bottle. Oh, but it's gone again. But also she's realizing here, I should have let it stay buried. It was buried for a reason. There were legitimate arguments for why this ended in the first place. And I, the fool, chose to ignore them. We embroidered over those memories at the time I was away. We rewrote their meaning. All was forgiven in the pursuit of this massive love, but we embroidered over the rot that killed us the first time. And guess what? It grew back. And here's where the salt really enters the wound. Oh, what a valiant roar. What a bland goodbye. The coward claimed he was a lion. I'm combing through the braids of lies. I'll never leave. Never mind. Our fields of dreams engulfed in fire. Your arsons match your somber eyes. And I'll still see it until I die. You're the loss of my life. She's saying, good job, con man. Yep, you roared real loud. You told me all those lies and you did it with a straight face. And then, like a coward, which you always were, and I knew that from the first time it ended, and shame on me for embroidering over it with you to serve whatever disturbing abstraction you had created of who I actually am, you just left. This next part to me is so visual, and you can really hear her working through it in the song. It's so cathartic to hear her working it out on the page. I'm combing through the braids of lies. There's something here about like also the unraveling of her childhood self, putting that innocence and naivete away, because we hear about how she was the dutiful daughter with her plans laid, the tendrils tucked into a woven braid on But Daddy I Love Him, which is also about this decision. That song is actually about the embroidering of the memories. That song is about, I don't care what happened before or what other people think about this. I'm in love and na 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 because I'm back in touch with that young romantic version of myself and nothing's going to hurt me now. Not only is she having to reconcile with the fact that she lost the love of her life, or so she thinks, she's also recognizing that it's happened again. Oh, it's gone again. I have gotten in touch. I have jumped in with 2 feet as I always do, and I have not learned. She's finding evidence in the drawers of her mind. She's pulling out all the conversations that proved it all happened and he was actually there to begin with, and realizing, oh yeah, you actually did say this. You said I'll never leave. And then he said with only his absence, oop, never mind. The gag is that the act of combing through the braid of lies is writing this song. It's writing the Tortured Poets department. It's writing My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys. It's definitely writing The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived. LOML is the first step in the tonal shift of the record because much of it is about the reunion, the anticipation of the reunion, at the very least. Guilty as Sin, Fresh Out the Slammer, The Alchemy, the Tortured Poets department. Here is where she accepts that it's over, and she also shows us the damage that it has had on her. That is embarrassing for all the reasons that I've listed, but it is also brave and courageous and the kind of artistic choice that keeps me around, that keeps me tuned in and plugged into Taylor Swift and is exactly the reason why she is a writer unlike any other pop writer doing it right now. Our field of dreams engulfed in fire, your arsons match your somber eyes. She was starry-eyed, but she wasn't meeting his gaze. When she finally looked up from her starry-eyed dream and locked eyes with him, she saw who he really was. It was all up in flames. Every rotten, low-down lie he told her in service of whatever the hell he thought he was going to get out of this. And then our queen of drama has to, of course, end the song with, "I'll still see it until I die. You're the loss of my life." And you know what? There is an element of truth to that. She will see this till the day that she dies because she has never had her heart broken like that before. Not even by him. It wasn't even like this the first time around that it happened. Not even by him. And it wasn't like this was their first time around. All they had was the question because it had never really gotten started. So she didn't really get to see how it properly ends. Now she has learned that the idle mind is the devil's playground. And if you go snooping, you might find something you don't want to see. You might reconnect with someone you really shouldn't be opening your arms to. And she will see this truth for the rest of her life because her music and her life's work is forever altered by this new perspective on heartbreak that she has experienced and reported on and presented to us. In a very real way, Taylor's breakups are like seasons in her life. They mark the passage of time. They mark her personal growth. They mark her artistic development. And we are so damn lucky to bear witness to it. That is all I have for you in today's video. Let's see who wins these Grammy Awards. You know, Tortured Poets, whether it wins or loses, I'm pretty sure it's going to lose. It is my album of the year, and it is much better than these people on the internet would like to have you believe. And they wouldn't have the scruples to sit here and do this kind of work and understand this song. So thank you for doing that here with me today. You are one of the smartest people on the internet. Leave me a comment and let me know what you think about LOML, and if you have an alternative argument for another song on this record that you think is the best song, the emblematic song of the entire project, I would love to hear your rationale for it. All right, goodbye, Swifties.